Yes, hello everyone. Welcome to the next video. So in this one, we're going to be looking at the economic cycle. And to be fair, this is honestly one of the most important and core lessons that you need to understand, especially when it comes to fundamentals. It's the basic understanding of where we are in the economic cycle and what that usually entails. So just as a brief look at the economic cycle, this is what you usually have. First stage would be recession. Then early recovery is the bottoming area. Then of course you get that growth, the late recovery. And then as soon as you start to see, too much recovery and the economy starts to slow down again, that's early recession. So as you can see, the economy moves in waves, and usually it's a progressive and positive wave. So after every market cycle and every economic cycle, you get a growth in the economy. Hence why economies are always growing, money supply is always increasing, everything like that, GDP. So an economic cycle usually lasts around 5 years. More recently, they've lasted, you know, as long as 10 years, but typically last around 5 years. So the first stage that we're going to be looking at is the recession. So the characteristics that you'd usually see in a recession is GDP retracts after two consecutive quarter readings. Interest rates fall, consumer expectations drop, and yield curves remain normal. So we're going to be getting onto yield curves and, of course, all the consumer expectations and interest rates. But of course, refer back to these lessons once you have a proper understanding of them points as well. Then after the recession, we get the early recovery. So that's the point where the economy starts improving with a rise in GDP. Then consumer expectations rise, industrial production also increases. Interest rates are at complete lows, so near 0%. Usually around the world, you would see between 0 and 0.25%, sometimes even negative. And then yield curve is very steep at this point as well. Then after that, you get the late recovery where consumer expectations drop, industrial production is neutral or flat. So in comparison to the previous stage where we had the early recovery, this is where the economy starts to boom again as it once was. In the late recovery, industrial production is quite low. Interest rates start rising as well. So, you know, the central banks, they have to take action against all that inflation that is happening in this early recovery stage. And then, of course, the yield curve remains flat as well. And then the final stage that we look at is the early recession. So consumer expectations are at the lowest. Industrial production is very bad. So you can expect GDP to not be too great either. Interest rates are very high. So not much economic activity. Not many people are borrowing money. Not many people are taking loans, business loans or whatever it may be. Hence why businesses are not as active. And then the yield curve flattens or can even invert. And this is a very dangerous stage that we're going to be looking at. When the yield curve inverts or remains flat, that's when we're going to get into that in more detail in the next few lessons. But how does this consistently happen? Now think about it logically in terms of interest rates. When they become low, more participants are likely to take loans due to the low interest rates, therefore increasing economic stimulation. This affects production, GDP, employment, and every other factor that we've looked at. Now, when there's too much expansion, or so-called overheating is what economists call it, interest rates are increased to slow down the economic expansion. Each time the economy grows more and more and accumulates more and more debt, also money supply increases as well. Now, if I was to ask you, where are these areas? Where are interest rates being increased? Where are they being decreased? You need to understand that in terms of the economic cycle. So let's look at this. This is the expansion stage, right? When the economy is getting back to how it was, GDP is increasing, more employment, everything like that. Inflation is also increasing. So that's something that central banks have to look at. Now, when there's too much expansion, as I've said here as well, or also known as overheating, that's when the central banks will have to increase interest rates because they eventually need to slow down the economic expansion. Otherwise, you'll get factors happening like hyperinflation, and then, of course, the downfall of the economy. On the opposite spectrum, when interest rates become low, there's not much economic activity happening. And no, I mean, sorry, when there's low interest rates, there's a lot of economic stimulation, lots of economic activity, and then of course that's when inflation starts to kick in. You just got to understand this cycle, where we are in the world right now, what's happening, and then of course look at all your other factors. But anyways, guys, that's it for the economic cycle. Definitely search this up. Any graphs you can see, the characteristics obviously I've listed here, take note of them, and then actually understand what point in the cycle we are in the economy, and then you can assume how that affects a certain type of currency. Anyways, guys, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.